Marcus Turner was the kind of man everyone in Brooksville knew and liked. At 35, he had settled into a quiet, steady life as a maintenance technician at the local community center. A job that suited him because it let him fix things and help people, two things he enjoyed. He lived in a small single-story house at the edge of town that had belonged to his parents. And his mornings began before dawn with a cup of coffee on the porch while he watched the sun lift over the trees. To Marcus, life's pleasures were simple: a friendly nod at the diner, an honest day's work, and the satisfaction of being useful to his neighbors. He moved through his days with a warm smile and a steady pair of hands, and people trusted him for both his skill and his decency. One evening, driving home along a winding road outside of town, Marcus noticed a car pulled over with its hazard lights blinking. A young woman stood beside it, clearly upset. Without hesitating, he pulled over. She introduced herself as Sarah Collins, flustered and on the verge of tears, explaining that she'd gotten a flat and didn't know how to change it. Marcus set to work with practiced efficiency, placing the jack, loosening the lug nuts, swapping out the tire, and securing the spare. Sarah watched him with a mixture of gratitude and nerves. She'd only recently moved to the area and was still finding her footing. When the job was done, she reached into her purse to offer him cash, but Marcus refused, telling her that helping was thanks enough. She lingered a beat longer than politeness required, then drove away with a relieved wave. Marcus climbed into his truck, feeling the satisfaction of a small good deed done, unaware that the evening's encounter would unsettle his quiet life. The next morning, as he sat drinking coffee, Marcus noticed a sleek black SUV parked curbside, its dark windows making it impossible to see inside. At first, he chalked it up to a neighbor's visitor, but as the hours passed and the vehicle stayed put, curiosity curdled into unease. The SUV wasn't typical in Brooksville, where most cars were older and practical. It looked out of place, deliberate. Marcus tried to focus on work at the community center, but his attention kept drifting to the thought of that silent vehicle. By midday, he discovered the SUV across the street from the grocery store and, after taking a few intentional detours through town, confirmed his suspicion. The SUV was following him, always near but never close enough to be confrontational. The discovery left him hollow with worry. That night, the SUV returned and parked at the end of Marcus's block like a dark sentinel. He debated calling the police, but worried he might not be taken seriously. He thought of confronting the occupants, but imagined how dangerous that could be. He locked his door and watched from the window until exhaustion finally claimed him. When sleep came, it was fitful and punctuated by dreams of tinted glass and shadowy figures. The next day, the SUV vanished for a while but reappeared again and again, never overt, always watching. Marcus's calm, orderly world began to fray with questions he couldn't answer. Who was in the SUV? Why were they following him? And how had a simple act of kindness become the catalyst for this surveillance? Refusing to be paralyzed by fear, Marcus decided to take action. He watched for the SUV, and when it reappeared parked at the end of his street, he walked toward it with a gathering resolve. The window on the driver's side cracked open and a silhouette was visible, but before he could speak, the vehicle roared away, tires screaming as it turned the corner. The sudden flight only deepened his unease. It felt less like a retreat and more like a message. Whoever was inside had made their presence known, then left before Marcus could learn anything useful. That absence felt more menacing than any confrontation. As the days wore on, Marcus found it harder to concentrate. He began checking his mirrors more often, scanning the neighborhood for any unfamiliar face or car. At the community center, he forced himself through routine repairs, but the worry sat at the back of his throat. Friends and coworkers noticed he was distracted. Denise at reception teased him gently until he confided in halting words about the SUV. People offered sympathy and practical advice. Call the police. Let someone else check your house. But Marcus hesitated, wary of escalating the situation. He also felt a strange, reluctant pride. He had helped a stranger without expecting anything, and somehow that simple decency had ricocheted into something larger than either of them. One afternoon, while changing a fluorescent light in the hall, Marcus spotted a news piece on the television in the break room. A minor report of a theft ring operating out of neighboring counties. Incidents involving untraceable vehicles and people who didn't stay in one place long. The details were thin, but the sight of the story snapped at the loose ends in his mind. The SUV's behavior, precise, watchful, always at a distance, fit the pattern of someone conducting reconnaissance rather than random intimidation. He left the center with a plan to speak to Officer Rivera, the local cop he trusted most, and asked only for advice on whether to file a report. Rivera listened, brows furrowing, and promised to keep an extra eye around Marcus's neighborhood. But the response felt inadequate against the nagging certainty that someone was tailing him for a reason connected to Sarah. Driven by mounting anxiety and the need for answers, Marcus decided to find Sarah. He retraced the route where he had helped her, stopping at the diner and the office park she'd mentioned. At last he located the building where she said she worked and, after a hesitant conversation with a receptionist, learned that Sarah had left town unexpectedly a few nights earlier. Her office had a week's worth of missed calls and a single note on her desk, an appointment scheduled with an unknown number. The discovery sent a cold rush through him. Sarah's abrupt departure suggested the SUV and the people inside weren't merely local troublemakers. They were professionals, and Sarah's nervousness the night she thanked him might have been fear of something far bigger than a flat tire. As clues accumulated, Marcus's life narrowed to suspicion and small, deliberate acts of self-protection. He changed his routines, varied his routes, and began keeping a journal of times and locations where he saw the SUV. He told his sister, who urged him to leave town for a few days. He refused, stubborn in his belief that running would feel like surrender. Instead, he invested in small safeguards, new locks, motion lights, and checked his phone for any unusual calls. The town's friendly rhythms continued at the surface, but beneath them, Marcus felt the current of something dangerous. One evening, the SUV returned, but did not flee. This time, as Marcus approached, two men stepped out and waited with an odd mixture of calm and purpose. Marcus felt the familiar muscle of fear tighten, but before words were exchanged, the men spoke first, their tone neutral and carefully measured. They asked a string of questions about Sarah, where she'd been, who she knew, and it became painfully clear they were following her through anyone who had been in contact with her, including him. Marcus answered as honestly as he could without revealing anything he didn't know. The men listened, said little, then got back into their SUV and drove off as smoothly as they had arrived. Their manner told him all he needed to know. They weren't looking for conversation. They were collecting information, testing boundaries. After they left, Marcus stood on his porch feeling less safe than ever, but also oddly resolute. He had helped a stranger once simply because it was the right thing to do, and that act had set a chain of events into motion that now threatened to undo the quiet life he loved. He thought about Sarah, anxious, polite, and probably terrified of something she'd never fully explain, and about the fragile, sometimes dangerous intersections between people's lives. The SUV's departure offered no comfort. It only underscored how little he understood and how much remained at stake. In the days that followed, Marcus continued to gather what information he could, sharing it with Officer Rivera and staying close to friends who could watch his back. Brooksville's slow rhythm masked the tremor under the surface, a ripple from a small kindness that had expanded outward into a network of unknown motives. Marcus did not know who had sent the SUV or why his brief help to Sarah had connected him to whatever game was being played. He only knew that his world had tilted in a way he could not ignore. Determined to find out the truth, he steeled himself for whatever came next. Aware that one ordinary evening, a spare tire and a handshake, had altered the course of his life, and that the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Marcus stepped out into the crisp morning air, hoping the walk would clear his mind, but his nerves remained unsettled. The familiar sounds of children laughing in the yards and neighbors waving offered a fleeting comfort, almost making the day feel normal again. That sense of peace shattered the moment he returned home and saw the black SUV parked exactly where it had been the day before. His heart sank, but this time it wasn't dread that gripped him, it was determination. Whoever was behind this, he needed to find out. As he reached his porch, the SUV door opened. Two men in sharp suits stepped out with an air of quiet authority. One was older, tall, his graying hair slicked neatly back. The other younger, his gaze steely and unwavering. The older man greeted him smoothly, introducing himself as James Bennett and the younger as Mr. Turner. They represented the Montgomery family. The name meant nothing to Marcus until Bennett reminded him of Sarah Montgomery, the young woman whose flat tire he had helped fix late one night. Bennett explained that Sarah was the daughter of Richard Montgomery, a billionaire businessman. Marcus was stunned. He had no idea who she was when he offered his help. Bennett smiled as though it were a simple detail, explaining that Sarah hadn't shared her identity in the moment. When Marcus asked what they wanted, Bennett assured him they weren't here to take anything but to offer him something instead. Turner finally spoke, his tone clipped and direct. They were there to reward Marcus for his kindness. Marcus frowned, confused. To him, he had done nothing extraordinary, just helped a stranger in need. Bennett insisted that in a world where most would have driven by, Marcus's selflessness stood out, and the Montgomery family wanted to repay him. Suspicion gnawed at Marcus. What kind of reward were they talking about? Bennett and Turner exchanged a look before answering. Whatever Marcus desired. Money, a new home, a better job, anything. The Montgomery family had the power to change his life completely. Marcus's eyes narrowed. There was always a catch. Bennett denied it, claiming it was nothing more than a gesture of goodwill. But Marcus knew better. Nothing that powerful ever came free. Despite the polished reassurances, Marcus refused. He didn't want to owe anything to people like the Montgomerys. Bennett's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered, suggesting Marcus take some time to reconsider. Marcus shook his head firmly. He lived a good life already, and he wasn't interested. Turner's expression darkened, but Bennett stepped in again, calmer now, and handed Marcus a simple card with only a phone number printed on it. He urged Marcus to keep it just in case he changed his mind. Then the two men left, climbing back into the SUV that drove silently away, leaving Marcus uneasy on his porch. Inside, he turned the card over in his hand, debating whether to throw it away or keep it. Though part of him wanted to be rid of it, something deep inside urged him to hold on. He tucked it into a kitchen drawer, hidden but not forgotten. The rest of his day carried on as usual, chores, visits with friends, even an evening jog. But the encounter gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The Montgomerys had taken an interest in him, and people like them rarely took no for an answer. That night, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He had always lived by principles, integrity, humility, doing what was right without expecting a reward. Yet the Montgomerys' words echoed in his mind. What would life be like if he had accepted? No bills, no struggles, the weight of the world lifted. But he also knew that happiness had never come from wealth or power for him. It came from community, relationships, and the simple life he had built. Still, doubt lingered. Unable to sleep, Marcus rose before dawn and sat in his living room wrestling with the decision. He finally decided he couldn't carry the weight of it alone. The next day, he invited a few trusted people, his childhood friend Derek, his sister Angela, and his Aunt Clara. They gathered in his small living room, watching him expectantly as he told them everything, helping Sarah, the men who came to his porch, the extraordinary offer. When he finished, silence settled. Angela spoke first, sharp and certain. Offers like that always had strings attached. Clara agreed, her wisdom steady. Anyone who offers you the world expects something in return. Derek, however, wasn't so sure. He pointed out that opportunities like this didn't come every day. With that kind of help, Marcus would never worry about money again. The debate grew tense, Angela warning of hidden costs, Derek seeing possibilities while Marcus rubbed his temples torn between the two. Clara finally laid a comforting hand on his arm, reminding him that it wasn't only about what he could gain, it was about what he might lose. Her words settled heavily in Marcus's chest, and before he could respond, a knock at the door broke the moment. Everyone went still. Marcus rose slowly, his pulse quickening, and opened the door. Standing there was Sarah Montgomery. She looked different from the night he had helped her, composed, though a weariness lingered in her eyes. Her voice was quiet, urgent. She apologized for showing up unannounced, but insisted she needed to talk. Marcus hesitated, then stepped aside, allowing her in. As she entered the room, the others exchanged wary glances, and Marcus realized that whatever this was, the situation had just taken another turn. Marcus's house was filled with tension as Sarah entered, her presence both unexpected and urgent. She greeted the room politely, but her eyes quickly found Marcus. She confessed that the night he had stopped to help her wasn't just about a flat tire. She had been running, not from inconvenience, but from danger. Her family, she explained, carried power that came with enemies ruthless enough to use her as leverage. Marcus and the others listened in stunned silence as she revealed that her desperation that night had been more than fear. It had been survival. She admitted she hadn't told him before to protect him, but now he was already involved whether he liked it or not. Her warning was clear. The Montgomery family's offers, no matter how generous they appeared, came with consequences. She urged him not to let wealth or influence dictate his choices, but to stay true to himself. Looking him in the eye, she thanked him. His small act of kindness had saved her from something much darker than a broken car. That night, Marcus wrestled with her words. He thought about the SUV, the men in suits, and the offer that lingered in his mind. He valued his independence, but he also couldn't ignore the possibilities. What if those resources were used not for himself, but for others? As dawn broke, he made a decision. He would accept their help, but on his terms. When Marcus finally called, his voice was steady. He didn't ask for money or a mansion. He demanded a community center, a scholarship fund, real tools for real people. Weeks later, the project was alive. Children playing on new courts, families gathering in a safe space, young students holding letters of acceptance to schools they once thought impossible. The black SUV still lingered on his street, but it no longer symbolized fear. It had become a reminder that he had turned power into purpose. As the center thrived, Marcus remained grounded. He still waved to neighbors, still helped when asked, but now with the ability to create lasting change. Sarah often visited, no longer the frightened woman on the roadside, but a friend and ally in building something greater. Together, they stood watching the laughter of children echo across the center's courtyard. Marcus smiled, realizing that his life had changed forever, but not because of wealth or influence. It had changed because one night he chose kindness. And in the end, that choice had been powerful enough to reshape an entire community. Marcus felt a familiar weight settle in his shoulders the moment Bennett spoke. Admiration lingered in the man's eyes, but Marcus knew what that really meant. The Montgomerys weren't content with a single community center or a scholarship fund. They saw potential in him, and when the Montgomerys saw potential, they pursued it without hesitation. When Bennett explained their vision, Marcus listened carefully. They wanted to replicate his model, not just in Brooksville, but across the state, perhaps even the nation. Marcus accepted the folder Bennett offered, though it felt heavier than mere paper. Inside lay a crossroads, another choice that could redirect the course of his life. He told Bennett he'd look it over, but he couldn't make promises. His focus was still here with his people. Bennett gave his usual polished smile and excused himself, leaving Marcus and Sarah in the quiet aftermath. They won't let up, Sarah said softly. Once the Montgomerys see potential in something or someone, they don't stop. Marcus glanced at the folder, the weight of it pressing against his arm. I know, but I can't lose sight of why I started this. It was never about building an empire. Sarah's touch was steady on his arm. That's why you're the right one for this. You won't let power change you. The day blurred with activity. Marcus poured himself into work, meeting with volunteers, planning new programs, listening to neighbors. By evening, exhaustion pressed hard, but so did fulfillment. The black SUV still trailed him at a discreet distance, no longer just a threat but a reminder of influence, and the responsibilities tied to it. Later at home, the folder sat on his table. Marcus stared at it for a long time before opening it. The proposals were ambitious, a network of centers, all under his leadership, making him the face of a movement that could transform countless lives. Excitement battled apprehension. He knew the potential for good was immense, but so was the danger of losing his way. That night stretched long into morning as he wrestled with notes, fears, and possibilities. When dawn came, clarity was still out of reach. His walk through the neighborhood showed him the faces of families still struggling, children whose futures seemed uncertain. The weight of what he could do pressed down on him harder than ever. At the community center, he was surprised to find Aunt Clara waiting, her warm smile betraying her usual wisdom. Over coffee, Marcus told her everything. She listened quietly, then shared her own story, of a choice she'd faced long ago between the life expected of her and the life she dreamed of. She had chosen the unknown, terrifying but true to herself. Her words struck deep. The question isn't whether you should take this opportunity, she said. The question is whether you can stay true to yourself while doing it. Marcus admitted his fear of losing his way, but Clara reminded him of what she had always known. His compass was strong, and if he trusted it, he wouldn't falter. Her wisdom carried him through the following days. He sought counsel, listened to community voices, and finally called Bennett for a meeting, not in a glass tower but in the modest office of the Brooksville Center. Marcus laid out his conditions. The network would grow, but it would never become a corporate empire. Each community would shape its own center, led by local voices, not dictated from above. He would remain rooted in Brooksville, never a distant figurehead but a servant leader connected to the people he aimed to help. For once, Bennett's mask slipped. After a long silence, he admitted he had underestimated Marcus. "Your ambition isn't for yourself," he said. "It's for others. That makes you the right man for this." Months became years. Marcus worked tirelessly, visiting towns and cities, listening first, building second. He demanded transparency, publishing reports for anyone to see, ensuring the work stayed honest. Each center became its own heartbeat, different in character yet united by the same spirit. Children flourished, families found stability, and adults discovered new purpose. But challenges came too. Corrupt officials resisted, opportunists tried to twist the mission, and at times Marcus felt the easy path of power tugging at him. When a mayor smeared his name to protect his own influence, Marcus could have crushed him with a phone call. Instead, he chose patience, dialogue, and transparency. Slowly, even skeptics turned to allies. Years later, Marcus stood before a crowd in Brooksville, unveiling a new healthcare wing. Familiar faces, Angela, Derek, Aunt Clara, and even Sarah, looked on with pride. Marcus's voice carried with conviction as he reminded them that this wasn't his achievement alone, but theirs. The real power had never been in money or influence, but in people, neighbors choosing to care, to work together, and to believe in something bigger than themselves. Applause filled the air, but Marcus's heart was steady. He had taken the Montgomerys' offer, but he had reshaped it, refusing to become their puppet. Instead, he had turned influence into impact, and wealth into something greater. Hope. Later, Sarah joined him quietly at the edge of the celebration. "When I first met you," she said, wonder soft in her voice, "I never imagined this." Marcus smiled. "Neither did I. Life's full of surprises." And in that moment he understood. His life had changed forever, but at the core, he remained the same man who had once stopped on a dark road to help a stranger. Kindness had brought him here, and kindness would keep him true.